So good day. Our topic is all about engineering processes in construction and repair. So our objectives is the learner should know what is metal fabrication, a fabrication technique, types of fabrication technique, the welding, forging, and casting, processes and examples of fabrication technique. So before that, let's define what is metal fabrication. So the term metal fabrication refers to the processes to create a finished part or product by shaping, adding, or removing materials from a raw or semi-finished metal workpiece. So in other words, metal fabrication is all about creating something or making something from a scratch. And what are the fabrication techniques? So there are many types of fabrication techniques, but we're only discussing the welding, forging, and the casting.
My name is Alexander Olumanaw. I would like to report about welding. So, welding is the one of the most popular metal fabrication processes among crafts enthusiasts. So, using a couple of tools and various types of metals, welding can transform any face into any shape and design the desired, all with spark flying around in the process. The process of welding involves the joining of two separate metal parts. The welding is a high heat process of the utmost heat and sometimes an addition of the other metals or gases causes the metallic structure join become a single structure. A fabrication process whereby two or more parts are fused together by means of heat, pressure, or both forming a joint as the part of coal. There are four main types of welding processes. First, the gas arc welding, GMAW or MIG. So it's also known as MIG, which is metal inert gas welding. This process uses a thin wire as an electrode. So, gas metal arc welding or MIG ay ginagamit ng isang manipis na wire bilang isang electrode. So when we say electrode, ito ay isang conductor kung saan pumapasok o umaalis ang kuryente sa isang bagay. Gas metal arc welding is believed to be one of the easier welding techniques to learn, which makes it a great area of focus for beginning welder. So, GMAW is ito ang mas madaling gawin o madaling paraan para sa mga nagsisimula ng pag-welding. This seems to be a major welding because it is for beginners.
What is MIG welding? MIG stands for Metal Inert Gas Welding. The American Welding Society calls this process gas metal arc welding or GMAW. You might also hear it called wire welding. In MIG welding, a thin wire acts as the electrode. This wire is fed from a spool mounted on a gun or inside the welding machine through a flexible tube and out of the nozzle on the welding gun or torch. The wire is fed continuously when the trigger on the welding gun is pulled.
Second, gas tungsten arc welding. So, GTAW or TIG. This type of welding process, also known as tungsten inner gas or tin welding, is commonly used to weld together tin and non-ferrous materials like aluminum, copper, lead, or nickel. So, GTAW welding ay karaniwang ginagamit upang pagsamahin ang manipis at non-ferrous na materials just like aluminum, copper, lead, nickel. Ang ganitong proseso ng pag-welding ay isa sa pinakamahirap na pamaraan because it requires you to coordinate both hands and one foot all that at the same time. You will need to hold torch with one hand and pillar rod with the other hand, and your foot will control the heat of the torch. So TIG welding is one of the hardest welding process to learn.
What is TIG welding? TIG stands for Tungsten Inert Gas Welding. The American Welding Society calls this process gas tungsten arc welding or GTAW. You might also hear it called heliarc welding. TIG welding uses a tungsten electrode, and tungsten has an extremely high melting point. When you TIG weld, the electrode gets hot, but it doesn't melt. We say that it's a non-consumable electrode. That doesn't.
And the third, shielded metal arc welding or SMAW. This type of welding process rely on a manual techniques using a consumable electrode coated in flux. This method tend to most popular among home shop welders. So this process is also more information known as stick welding. Stick welds don't typically produce the best quality product. So in shielded metal arc welding process uses an electric circuit that supports a welding arc to convert electric lines, powers, or coil into heat. The heat from the welding arc is intense and extremely concentrated. It immediately melts a portion of the workpiece and the end of the electrode. It is most popular method because of the versatility of the process and the simplicity of the equipment and operation. And the last is flux cord arc welding, FCOW. So similar to MIG welding, flux cord arc welding revolves around a continuous wire feed process. This type of welding is known for being expensive and easy to learn. So, FCOW and MIG welding is similar when it comes to the process using continuous wire feed equipment and that machine as well. Among the differences, the MIG welding process uses a solid wire electrode, while the FCOW uses a tubular welding wire.
My name is Louie. What is forging? First, manufacturing process involving the shaping of metal using localized compressive force. It's often classified according to the temperature at which it is performed. Cold forging, warm forging, or hot forging. Forging methods. There are several forging methods with different capabilities and benefits. Draft forging. Draft forging derives its name from the process of dropping a hammer onto the metal to mold it into the shape of the die. Isa proseso ng pag-drop ng martilyo papunta sa bakal upang hulmain ito sa hugis ng die. There are two types of drop forging. They are open die and closed die forging. Open die forging is also known as Smith forging. A hammer strike and deform a metal on a stationary anvil. Closed die forging is also known as impression die forging. The metal is placed in die and attached to an anvil. Ito yung example ng feature ng open die forging and closed die forging. Roll forging consists of two cylindrical or semi-cylindrical horizontal rolls that deform around or flat bar stock.
Having evolved from art form to a strictly controlled engineering process, ring roll forging has earned its status as one of the most significant advancements in the forging industry. No other process can produce seamless rings with such superior structural properties, or with the same levels of weight reduction, materials savings, and reduced machining costs. Homogeneous grain flow around the ring, manufacturing ease, tooling simplicity.
So now let's proceed to casting. So what is casting? So casting is when molten metal is poured, a mold or dyed, and allowed to cool and harden into the desired shape. So the example or the picture here is the illustration of how casting look like. So there are different types of casting processes used in manufacturing, such as die casting, investment casting, plaster casting, and sand casting. So what is sand casting? So sand casting, also known as sand molded casting, is a sand molded casting characterized by using sand as the molded material. So this casting is explained by itself. Syempre, ang pangunahing material na ginagamit sa casting na ito is syempre yung buhangin. So there are some examples of items manufactured in modern industry by sand casting process are the bulbs, engine, blocks, bearings, gears, and etc. So the illustration here is a simple pattern or the process of how sand casting form. So the first is place mold pattern in the sand, and the second is set up the gating system, and the third is remove the mold pattern. Number 4 is the pour molten metal into the mold cavity, and number 5 is wait for the metal to cool, and the last is break open mold to remove the metal casting. Examples of products that are cast using the sand casting. So the ornament, trailing ends, the one-off sculpture or ornaments, and engine parts such as pipes. And let's proceed to plaster casting. So plaster casting is similar to sand casting processes using a mixture of gypsum, strengthening compound, and water in the place of the sand. So the picture or illustration here is the process of how plaster casting form. So in the first picture is making of the plater slurry. So the ingredients or the material used is the gypsum and the water, and the second picture is a ceramic mold making and plaster, parang nilagay niya sa isang lagayan yung pinaghalo na gypsum at tubig. And the last is the final production or the drug. And this is the example of the products of plaster casting. And next is the die casting. Die casting is an automated casting process in which the liquid melt is pressed into a mold under the high pressure of 150 to 120 bar, and at a high filling speed up to 500 km per hour. So the example or this is the example of die casting process. Example of products made by die casting. So the metal toy cars, the high-end cameras, engine parts, the iron pans, and the handles. And the last is the investment casting or the loose wax casting. So the term invested historically carries the meaning of the cloth or surrounded. Investment casting employs a shell made of ceramic, plaster, or plastic that is formed around the wax pattern. Process or pattern of investment casting. So number 1 is creating the pattern. The second is mounting the wax patterns and creating the tree. And letter C is creating of the mold shell. And for letter D is wax removal. Letter E is melt and cast, and the last is the final operation. Once the casting has cooled sufficiently, the mold shell is broken away from the casting is knockout operation. So these are the examples of products that cast using investment casting. So basically anything that needs to be cast but is very complicated shape that could never be removed from a normal die or mold. So I hope you learned something from us today. So that's gonna be all. Thank you and God bless.